Hello and welcome to the third video in this series about mole calculations. What we're going to be looking at in this video is calculating the number of particles if we're given the moles or mass of a substance. So there's two things that we need in order to do this. The first is the equation that we've been using in the last couple of sessions, okay, which is the fact that moles equals the mass divided by the mR. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is the fact that the number of particles in a mole is 6.02 times 10 to the 23. Now that could be atoms, molecules, whatever it might be. If I have 1 mole of something, this is how many I have of it. Okay, so let's start with a real simple example. Okay, if I have 1 mole of, let's say, iron atoms, okay, that would have, okay, 6.02 times 10 to the 23 iron atoms. Okay, iron exists as sort of just in its elemental form. Okay, so there's just atoms of iron. So if I was to make this 2 moles, okay, of iron atoms, okay, so we've got 2 moles of iron atoms, so you would have 2 times the amount of 1 mole, which is 6.02 times 10 to the 23, okay, which equals, okay, 1.204 times 10 to the 24 iron atoms. Okay, so to break this down, essentially what we can conclude is the fact that the number of particles okay, equals the moles, okay, multiplied by 6.02 times 10 to the 23. Now this number, 6.02 times 10 to the 23, is given to you. So there's one other way that I can actually alter this into saying, okay, when we look at our moles equals our mass divided by mR. So we could also say mass divided by mR multiplied by 6.02 times 10 to the 23. Okay, so these two equations down the bottom, okay, are the two that we need to remember, okay, and how we can actually apply those two. So let's look at another couple of examples. Okay, so let's look at something a little bit different now. Let's talk about water, okay. So if I was to ask you, okay, how many water molecules are in 18 grams of water, okay, we need to think about a couple of things in this question. So the first, let's make that an actual question mark. So the first is, what's the important information in the question? Okay, well, the first thing is that we've got this word molecules. The second is that we've got 18 grams. Okay, so those two things are really important. So we know, I hope, that water is H2O. Okay, so we don't know how many moles we've got. We've got to figure out how many moles we have, and we can do that using our 18 grams. Okay, so let's think about the steps of what we've got to do. So let's go for number 1. Okay, so number 1, we're going to write out our equation. So the equation that we're going to have, okay, is the number of particles, so that could be our molecules. Okay, so I'm just going to write number of molecules. Okay, is going to equal, okay, now we would have moles. Now we don't have the moles, so we're going to have to use that second one, which is mass divided by mR, okay, multiplied by 6.02 times 10 to the 23. Okay, so let's fill in some of the gaps. That's going to be our second step. Okay, step number 2. Let's fill in some of these gaps. So the first bit, okay, I'm just going to now call our number of molecules x, okay, just so I don't have to write the whole thing out. Okay, mass, okay, we have in the question, so our mass is going to be 18. Now our mR we have to work out. So again, if we think back to the last time round, we talked about how we could work that out. Okay, we've got water, which is H2O. Okay, so we know that that is 2 lots of H and 1 lot of O. So we can work that one out. Okay, our 2 lots of H is 2, okay, and our 1 lot of O is going to be 16, so therefore our total is 18. Fantastic. So we can put that number, okay, straight into our MR here. Okay, so we know that this is 18. Okay, multiplied by 6.02 times 10 to the 23. So what we can actually do is we can very quickly say, well, okay, my third step is just going to be doing this calculation, which is 1 times 6.02 times 10 to the 3, which means that my answer is going to be 6.02 times 10 to the 23. Okay, that's molecules. Okay, so here's a second part of this question. Okay, so let's put it as a second part. Okay, this time, how many atoms are in, let's go for 36 grams of water. Okay, so let's break it down into steps. Okay, let's first off have a look at what the important thing is in the question. The first thing is atoms, okay, and then we've got 36 grams of water. Now, what we've got to think about is last time around we were looking at the molecule. Now, the molecule is the whole water thing. How many atoms are there within a water molecule, okay, before we think about this? So if we go to look at our water, okay, we've got H2O. So H2O is made up of 1 oxygen and 2 hydrogens. So this is our water. So in one molecule of water, there are 3 atoms. Okay, so first off, let's work out how many molecules there are, because what we have to do with a question like this is we have to think about the molecules, okay, before we go on to the atoms. So now we've got that little bit of extra information, let's go a little bit further into this question. Okay, so let's work out the number of molecules first, step number 1. Okay, so number of molecules, okay, is going to equal, okay, we're going to use this calculation the same as we used in the first question, slightly different numbers, so it's 36 divided by 18 multiplied by 6.02 times 10 to the 23. Okay, now this is going to tell me the number of molecules, so I can just put this in for the second step of my calculation, so I just have to do the maths behind that, so it's 6.02 times 10 to the 23 multiplied by 2, which is 1.204 times 10 to the 24 molecules. So if I know I've got that number of molecules, I've now got to turn this into my atoms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the information, okay, that I've got up here, that 1 molecule of water has 3 atoms in it. So what I can then do is take my answer from here, 1.204 times 10 to the 24, and I'll multiply it by 3. And this will give me, okay, the number of atoms. Okay, so my answer here is going to be 3.612 times 10 to the 24. Okay, so that's how many atoms that I have present in my 36 grams of water. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So as with the last few lessons, I'm going to give you a question, have a go at it, then we'll talk through it. Okay, so let's see how we've done. Okay, first off, important stuff in the question. So we've got molecules, we've got 142, and we've got chlorine, okay, Cl2. So step number 1, let's think about the equation that we're going to use. So the equation that we're going to use, okay, is the number of molecules equaling, okay, we haven't got our moles, so it's going to be mass divided by mR, because we know that we can sort of swap that with moles, multiplied by 6.02 times 10 to the 23. Okay, and again, that will be given to you as well. So step number 2, let's fill in some of our gaps. So I'm going to use X for my first bit. So we've got mass and mR. So the mass is going to be 142. Now our molecular mass, okay, what we've got to remember here is because we've got a molecule, okay, we need to combine the two. So we've got Cl2, which means that we've got 2 lots of chlorine, okay, which means that we've got 2 multiplied by 35.5, okay, which is going to equal 71. Okay, so our MR here is 71. We're then going to multiply that by 6.02 times 10 to the 23. And then step number 3, we can just put in our answer, okay, which means that we're going to have 2 multiplied by this, okay, which is going to be 1.204 times 10 to the 24 molecules. So that's part 1. Okay, what about part 2? So in part 2, we've got to be thinking about the number of atoms. So this time we've got chlorine, okay, so we've got Cl2. So in each molecule of chlorine, okay, so for every molecule, we're going to have 2 atoms. Okay, Cl2, 2 atoms, okay, per molecule. So what we can now do is we can look at our answer from part 1, okay, because our answer for part 1 gives us the number of molecules. And all we have to do for part 2 is multiply that answer by 2, okay, because our mass here is the same, it's not changed. Okay, so we're just looking at turning the number of molecules into the number of atoms. So all we need to do is just 2 times, okay, 1.204 times 10 to the 24, okay, and that's going to give us the number of atoms. So what we're going to have is we're going to have 2.412 times 10 to the 24 atoms. Okay, so just an example of the kind of questions that you might get. Okay, so we've got part 1, okay, and we've got part 2 of these 2 kinds of things here. So you could be asked to sort of interchange some of these different things. So they'll test your mathematical skills, they'll talk about rearranging formula, you might be given the number of particles and you might be asked to work out how many moles there are. So all you need to be able to do there is rearrange some formula, which if you look at some sort of mathematical skills, okay, that's what you should be able to do. Okay, right, so hopefully this video has been of some use. What we've looked at today is, also what we've looked at in this session, is we've just looked at turning the number of moles, or the mass, into a number of particles. We've also talked about making sure that we're thinking about what words are in that question. So if it's asking you about the number of molecules or the number of atoms, okay, so you've got to think about how certain things exist. Okay, remembering that molecules consist of multiple atoms, okay, as do compounds. Okay, they will have multiple atoms in them, so you've got to think about that when you're answering some questions. Okay, so thank you very much for watching. Please like and subscribe to the videos, subscribe to the channel, and I will catch you in the next video.